Again, welcome everybody. I'm Jinky Nogales. I'm one of the school gardens coordinator for GrowNYC, and I am joined by my colleagues. We've got Kristen, Laura, Colleen, we've got DK and Chantel and Tutu. So welcome. Today, our workshop is about gardens as community hubs, trying to build community in community gardens. We are GrowNYC. We protect the environment. We create green spaces. We help people stay healthy and give them opportunity to make a positive impact. In today's workshop, please submit your questions in the Q&A function. It is a lot easier for us to keep track that way. And we want to get to as many answer as many questions at the end of the presentation. You may use the chat for any general comments though. We will be recording for those that have missed the workshop, and we will send you a follow-up email with resources and the recording either tomorrow or Monday. Okay. And now I'd like you to meet your facilitators. We've got Chantel Kemp and DK Kinard. Chantel joined our GrowNYC team for the role of starting community and school gardens on or in very close proximity to New York City Housing Authority, commonly known as NYCHA, to bring much needed green space to these areas. She started this role in February 2020, unbeknownst that she would be doing all of this throughout a global pandemic that would hit especially hard in the neighborhoods of New York City. Although this presented a huge challenge, Chantel really persevered. DK is the newest, sorry, there's some echo going on. DK is the newest addition to our GrowNYC team, but not necessarily new at all to the community gardens. She has worked with New Roots Community Farm, Kelly Street Garden, La Finca del Sur, and Bissell Garden. And that's just to name a few. Together over the past 2 years, these two have started community gardens in Castle Hills in the Bronx, Bushwick houses and Melrose houses in Brooklyn. We're so excited for them to share their knowledge and experiences. So now I'm going to turn it over to them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jinky. That was a beautiful introduction. And yeah, so we're really excited just to be here today. Today in this workshop, we're going to walk you through some community agreements and what that means and why that's important as you start to create spaces and gardens. We'll talk a little bit about gardens at NYCHA and what it looked like, activating 3 different sites at 3 different times, 3 different communities, right? We'll talk about what it looks like in building the foundation, not the foundation of the garden, but the foundation of the community organizing and how all of that kind of comes together. We'll talk about, gathering your tribe and, how you can, basically get people on your team that support you and want to see the garden flourish. We'll talk about dreaming big and starting small and what that looks like. And then we have some other parts, executing the plan. We got some legacy planning in there, and then some tips to always remember. So now I'm going to swing it over to DK to run us through our community agreements.
Thank you, Chantel. So before we jump into community agreements, let's first understand and break down what community agreements even are. Community agreements are a very important first step to establishing the very reason that we're all here today. What's brought us here? Community. Community agreements are the set of boundaries that help us to not only establish, but maintain the foundation that makes a space inclusive, welcoming, and communal. Community agreements are the standards by which we hold ourselves accountable and each other accountable. And what's key about them is that there are commitments to the communities that we have agreed to serve. For today's workshop, Chantel and I have laid out some community agreements that for us are the foundation for this space. And they're essential in our work, and we want to share a few of them with you. Understand that community agreements are ever evolving. They're always changing, just like people, just like environments, just like gardens. For this space, Chantel and I present the following. The granddaddy of all community agreements starts with respect comes first, period, and always. We don't always have to like each other, and we might not, because we just all have different personalities, but we must respect each other. Listen actively. Understand that there's a difference between listening and hearing. When you listen to someone, really care about what they're saying and show them the respect that you would want if they were listening to you. Take space and make space. Everybody deserves to have a voice. Use yours and speak up. Conversely, understand that everybody has something to say. Make sure that you make space for others. If you have a very robust personality, we absolutely celebrate that. But consider using your platform to pass the mic to someone else who maybe doesn't have that ability or privilege. In this virtual space and in our gardens, we practice on mic. Possible, don't interrupt, just listen. But also, don't suck all the air out the room. Don't be a mic hog. Pass the mic so that everybody gets a chance to express themselves. This is one of my personal community agreement favorites. Respond to receive, not retaliate. Just breathe, keep it calm, and always remember, it's never personal. Let the garden be the motivator and the community be the driver. Take it easy and keep it moving. Always use I statements and respond from your own experience. We might all be in the same storm. We're not all in the same boat. We come to gardens and experiences all having very different levels of education, culture, and just life. Never make assumptions, and please don't make generalizations. Speak for yourself and let others speak for themselves. We want to hear from you. If your garden uses community agreements, tell us in the chat what community agreements your garden is using, whether they be these or others that you've experienced. Let us know what kind of community agreements y'all are rocking with. Chantel?
Yeah, I love that. I think you brought it home for us, and just emphasizing how important it is just to have that space where everyone feels heard and everyone feels respected and listened to, and it really does make a big difference. So yeah, let's keep moving.
Next slide. So let's talk about why we're here. Gardens are a really wonderful, communal, intergenerational, and cultural space that's primed for playing, learning, living, and growing. Always remember that green spaces are for all. They're spaces that everyone has the human right to have access to. A very dear friend and mentor who I have the honor of learning from every day, one of the first things that she ever shared with me about community is that when we have communities and neighborhoods that are devoid of green spaces, we have communities that are sick. Chantel and I have the tremendous honor of walking you through communities that are very dear to us. These are communities that are often overlooked because they're in low-income neighborhoods. They may be going through transition, they may be going through turmoil, they may be experiencing trauma. But Chantel and I are here today to share a very different perspective of these spaces. We're here to share the joys, the successes, the challenges, and the hardships of creating and stewarding spaces that many think are non-traditional and even unconventional. We're talking about the New York City Housing Authority communities. The acronym is NYCHA and that stands for NYCHA. And we proudly represent the GrowNYC Gardens at NYCHA. Chantel?
Wonderful. Yeah. And, this is just to give you guys an idea of, how different all three spaces are. And we're going to walk through that in the other slides. And, just want to let you guys know that a big part of this is just resilience and having a lot of empathy and coming in, understanding that what you might think is the best might not be what the community is looking for, right? And like really leaning into that tribe and the tutelage that comes into activating and managing spaces. So yeah, let's jump right into the next slide because I'm excited for you guys to see the Castle Hill Garden. And so, in the intro, we kind of glossed it over, but, I got hired in February and I was like, okay, it's about to be a beautiful summer. I'm going to be outside. I'm going to be with all the community members. It's going to be wonderful. And I had like these beautiful, like grandiose ideas of like all the activism and all the organizing and everything I was going to do. And COVID hit, right? COVID hit March. And we were like, okay, everybody was like, okay, go home. I'll see you in cyberspace. And, the funder was like, okay, keep going, make the garden, do your thing, right? And so it was very difficult to, for one, build up a hype around gardening and being outside when everyone is scared to be outside, right? And at the same time that all this COVID stuff is going on, we also have Black Lives Matter that's coming in. We have people that are protesting. We have different campaigns for community organizing that's coming out. And all the space that I'm in is experiencing this at a hyper level, right? And so then I had to like refocus and kind of change and, modify my approach to going into the community, because now it's not just about building a garden. Now it's about creating a safe space in the community, right? And how do I do that at a time when folks don't really know what it is to have a safe space, right? And so, we're doing the community organizing. We got surveys, we got a cool banner that we put up. I'm talking to people, I'm on the phone, I'm emailing, I'm doing all the things, right? And then, we're still dealing with COVID. So we're experiencing community loss. We lost the tenant association president who was like a big, advocate for the garden and helped, push a lot of things forward for us. And so then we had to regroup again, right? Because now it's not just the garden anymore. Now this is a legacy project. Now this is something that somebody literally, this was their last intentions to do in the community. And so we have to honor that in a way as well. And so, had to start over, right? Going back to the drawing board, seeing what the community needed so that way we can get the garden going, so that way they can feel supported. I'm going through my own grieving process as well. So it was a lot to navigate at that time. But December 2020, we came back, we built the garden, and we had a lot of support from community partners, from land stewards, from folks who lived in the community, from folks who used to live in the community and just came back because they were really excited about all the work that we were doing. And like, I really do believe that none of that would have been possible if I just laid down the garden beds and was like, hey, here's a garden. People would have been looking at me like, who are you? And why are you here? And what is this? Nobody asked for this, right? And so it's like, I really had to say, or I had to take a step back from, my deliverables and what I wanted to do. And I had to really focus in on what it was that the community needed at the time and how I could facilitate that and how I could use this space to facilitate that. And so really just talking people up and telling them, hey, listen, this is a space for us to connect. This is a healing space. We ended up dedicating the garden space to the late TA president. And so, really bringing it in as community focused. And I think, that's one of the big reasons why the garden has been as successful as it's been. Next slide. And then it didn't stop there, right? Because we had 2 other spaces that we had to do as well, right? And so, 2020, I'm kind of on a high. I'm feeling great. The garden is great. 2021 rolls around and everybody's like, okay, so we got 2 more sites. What's going on, right? So, building out, Bushwick and Melrose. And this is where DK really came in to like really support with a lot of just kind of the gelling, because we are dealing with different demographics. We're dealing with different, management styles when it comes to NYCHA. We're dealing with, infrastructure and environmental issues in the development, but then also just climate change, right? We're dealing with a new mayor, a new governor. We're dealing with all these different changes that in theory, a lot of us don't think is connected to activating space, but it really is, right? And we're still in a pandemic. We're still grieving. We're still dealing with trauma. We're still, trying to navigate what that looks like and trying to connect with partners and doing community outreach in a pandemic, right? And dealing with the fact that there is going to be conflict. And a lot of times we have to be the conflict resolutors, right? And we have to be the ones that step in and it's like, okay, so you don't like that. Okay, let's try to do it this way, right? And just trying to make sure that, everyone is not going to be happy, but everyone can be heard, right? And so coming in on that approach, and, it has been difficult, but it also has been humbling and beautiful and amazing to watch the spaces kind of flourish in their own ways. And they're all different. They all have their different personalities and they all do something different for the community. Dee, do you want to jump in and say something?
I do. And I just also want to share that it's never a one-size-fits-all strategy. The communities that we serve have very different personalities, and they're not shy about letting us know that. But the key is listening to them. And you never come into a community saying, you know what, I'm gonna lay my thing down and this is what we're gonna do. You have to listen to the community because they'll tell you what they want. It's also important to remember that your first time out the gate might not necessarily be your best time out the gate. And that's fine. Communities are different. Startups are different. One thing life has shown us is that it changes. You've got to be willing and ready to be flexible and adaptable to run with it. Chantel?
Yeah, I love that. I think adaptability, that has to be the word of the day, because if you cannot adapt, you are not going to survive, unfortunately, right? But it's great because what that adaptation does, it allows you to broaden your vision for what you had originally intended. You might have intended, hey, I'm gonna come in and we're gonna have tomatoes and we're gonna have eggplant, we're gonna have this, we're gonna have that. And then somebody's like, hey, let's do edible flowers. And that's not what you had intended to do, but now it works. Now people are really excited to come here and try different flowers. And I didn't know I could eat that. And I didn't know that this was this color. And I didn't know strawberries grew in a patch and all these different things, right? And so you get to really start to kind of expand, and it really becomes this kind of community energy that you start to create. And so I know you're all probably thinking, okay, that's what you did, but how do I do that, right? And so we're going to get into that a little bit in the next slide. And so we're talking about building a foundation, right? And this is not like the literal foundation of the garden. I know you see the garden beds there, but this is like before you put anything down, right? This is like, and even if you have a physical space already, this is like, maybe now, maybe maybe next season, you know what I'm saying? Before anything is starting, this is just what it looks like for the community organizing piece. And you can do this at any stage, but it's good to do it beforehand, right? And so introducing yourself. And I know that sounds silly, right? It's like, of course I introduce myself, but sometimes some of us, we have our title, we worked really hard, we went to school, I'm a doctor, I'm a nutritionist, I'm this, I'm that. And then you kind of forget that nobody knows that. And you also kind of forget that everybody is coming in from their own viewpoint and everybody else had a long day. You had a long day, I had a long day, Kristen had a long day, DK had a long day. We all had long days, right? So nobody really cares that you're a doctor. Nobody really cares that you went to school and you did all these things. People just want to know that you're there for the right reasons. People want to know that you're coming in with good energy and no, but I'm just saying, Ashley. But people want to know that you're coming in for the right reasons, and that, you know, when you're coming into the community, you're making sure that you're saying hello to people, you're saying good morning, you're saying good day, that, you know, people just feel welcome. You're inviting people to come into the garden as people are walking by. You're welcoming, be welcoming, right? The next thing is to make sure that you're listening to those community voices and that community vision, right? And Laura, is that you're listening to, you know, the community voices and the community vision, because like I said before, it's really going to expand what you had originally thought was possible. You might have came in and you only had a couple pieces of lumber and you're like, okay, I'm gonna build one bed. And then you meet, I don't know, this master carpenter from around the corner, and he comes in and he just builds out a whole garden for you. You never know. So make sure that you're really opening it up for the community to provide their input to expand the vision on what the space can look like. Also, you know, doing your research, and we'll talk a little bit about the canvassing document in the next slide, but, you know, doing your research, making sure that you understand what's the different components that's going on in the community, who can support you, how you can support them. You know, that's going to go a long way in the long run, right? So a lot of this stuff, this is for longevity, right? You're not going to get instant gratification from saying good morning every day, but eventually, once you know, build up that rapport with people, then you're going to start to see the kind of fruits of your labor, right? So at this point, we're planting seeds, right? Conducting surveys. A survey goes a long way, you know, just understanding what folks need in this space, for folks to feel like they're being heard, you know, making sure that you're doing your due diligence. You know, we talked about community agreements. That's great, especially if you're having meetings, to bring those up and let people add to them, let people, you know, set the standard of what the space is going to look like, and then they have to abide by that because they were a part of that. You know what I mean? And then also, you know, seeking out these change makers, these people that are in the community. You see them all the time. They're walking their dogs. Some lady across the street, she's really loud. Get that lady on your team, whoever that lady is. She's being loud. She could be loud about the garden, right? That's what I say all the time. People are sitting in front of the building. They're always there. That's like security. That's free security. Get that person on your team, okay? Like, let these people know, like, hey, like, we want you to be a part of this, right? And making sure that you're advocating for things that are also outside of the garden space, things that actually impact the community. And you're showing up, you're communicating. And this is a great way to start, you know, planting seeds when it comes to the rapport, to building community trust, and just letting people know, hey, the garden is a safe space, and this is how we're going to create that space. We're going to create that space together. You know,
I'm just going to add to that to change everything, we need everyone. And you'd be surprised how much talent is really out here in these gardening streets. To Chantel's point, you've got an electrician, you've got a carpenter, you've got a painter, you've got an artist, you've got an arborist, you've got a horticulturalist right there. Go into the community, make friends, let people show their talent. Another thing I want to share is the importance of the canvassing doc. The canvassing doc is your playbook. That's your blueprint of where you're going to pull all your plays of not only how it's going, but where it's going. Chantel joined the team in 2020,
Laura,
but I joined the team in 2022. The canvassing doc was the lifeblood for me because, as Chantel mentioned, we were still in a pandemic. So there was no in-office orientation for me. Right. When I joined, there were no immediate site visits because we were still in a pandemic. So the canvassing doc was not only my Bible to get up to speed so that when we did hit the sites and reach the community, I honestly knew what I was talking about. And now that I'm a part of the team, I can lend a new and different energy, a fresh eye to the canvassing doc because I'm coming in from a different perspective. So it's important that you don't let your canvassing doc just sit in a folder or on a shelf and collect dust. You've got to keep the canvassing doc up. And it's not a list that you have to do by yourself. When you're establishing community, ask the community, what should we put in this canvassing doc?
Mhm.
And they'll tell you. Next slide.
Love that. Yeah, and so I think that was a great overview of like why it's necessary to have the canvassing document and what it can look like. And it really is just a dossier that you build out that has different components in it, whatever is necessary that you feel, partners, different schools, what the space looks like, different pictures, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever it is that can help you and other people get a better idea of what the space is going to look like, what's the focus, who are the people that are around you, and just overall, what does the community look like? What did it look like before? What is it going to look like in the future? Et cetera, et cetera. Just so you can have some basis of knowledge about what's going on in the community, who are the players, and then you can use that to your best ability. So yeah, beautiful. And then I think that is a great tie-in to, gathering your tribe. So these are the people, like I said, the loud lady across the street, right? And the free security in front of the building, right? These are the people that are going to, be there to support you. These are the people that are going to, show up when you have events. These are the folks that are going to kind of tell you, hey, I know you're having your meeting on Mondays, but everybody's out on a Wednesday, so you should move it to a Wednesday so more people could show up. These are the people that are going to kind of check you and, put you in the right position where you need to be when establishing space, right? And so it can look like, setting up a meet and greet with the community. So it's like the garden is open, handing out flyers, or just telling people, hey, come sit in the garden. I do that like a million times a day. Come sit, right? Right. And it goes a long way, right? Engaging with folks, asking people, hey, what do you want to see in this space? If there are any people that are advocating for different stuff in the community, telling them, hey, use this space as a communal space for whatever it is that you're trying to do, right? Letting people know that this is a space that they can activate and that they can use to any degree, right? Even if it's like eating lunch or, it's a birthday or got spoken word, or you want to do some type of like herbal workshop, whatever it looks like, just opening up that space for that, right? And then also if there are any like community events that are happening, across from you or on that block or something like that, making sure you can ask, hey, you want to do a tie-in, you want to do a hunt, a scavenger hunt or something like that in the garden while you're doing this event, or I don't know, but just opening it up so that way people can feel connected to the space, right? And then, offerings. I love giving stuff out. It doesn't matter what it is. People will take it. People are excited to get free stuff, right? As we know, so it's a hard economy. We're going into a recession, right? So every dollar counts. And if you can offer somebody, some free oregano and some free cilantro, one year we gave out mangoes and people were really happy. I don't know when's the last time they had a mango, but that was something that they didn't have to go out and buy. And that was something that they knew, like if they came to the garden, they could possibly get something, right? And so making sure that you have some offerings, even if it's just, hey, I don't have anything today, but you could walk around, you could sit in the sun. Offering doesn't necessarily have to be something you can take, but it is something that you receive, right? And so thinking about it like that, right? And then, building that team that's going to support your garden, that's going to come in, that's going to water. You don't want to water every day. You want to have a day off. You don't want to prune every day. You want to go to your kid's birthday party, right? So like having this team that's going to be there to support the garden in your absence. And then, starting a communications platform. So whatever that looks like, email, text chat, Slack, I don't know, carrier pigeon, however you guys are doing it, just starting this, this communications platform so that everybody can stay in touch and feel connected to each other.
When you're gathering your tribe, it's important to always remember to be patient. A no today, a no for a week can turn into a yes when you least expect it. When it comes to handing out offerings, this is a really great way to not only start a conversation, but to build a conversation, to build a relationship, and to build trust. When you're gathering your tribe, pick people that honestly you least expect, because again, you never know what talent and what experience they're going to bring to the garden. When you gather your tribe, always remember that the garden is for everyone, so all are welcome. And again, receive them how they show up. Maybe one person's a little bit more verbal. Maybe another person isn't, but they've got great writing skills. We need everyone to change everything. So when you're gathering your tribe, look for those key players that not only are going to advance that ball down the field, but are going to keep the game and the garden going. Next slide. So it's important to remember that community members, have just so many wonderful experiences and more experiences than we may even realize. Always lean into your village. Seek out community members and organizations that support you. Remember, you don't need every partner. You just need the right partner. Evaluate the areas of need and focus on that in the beginning. It's not necessary to reinvent the wheel. Just tighten the spokes and focus on the areas that need the most help and that the community has told you that that's the direction they want to go. Expand your vision and think outside the box as well as inside the box. Chantel will tell you that I'm the farmer that's going, you get a garden, and you get a garden, and you over there, you get a garden. Chantel is the person that's going, yeah, you all get gardens. Let's just hone it in just a little bit. And you know what? We're both right. My mom used to say, never miss the forest for the trees. It's all right to dream big and have a great vision, but don't ever overlook or underestimate what's right in front of you. Lean into your visionaries. It's not Chantel and DK's garden. It's the community garden. It's okay for you as a supporter of the garden to sometimes lead from the front or rotate and lead from the back. It's all right to lean into your people and let everyone share the lift and carry the load. Make a plan for your dreams and then write it down. We are a wonderful community of story sharers. It's actually one of our greatest and most wonderful talents. But sometimes when we don't write things down, we can get lost in the process. Write it down so that not only can everybody see what the next play is going to be, we can see where we are, we can use it to forecast where we're going, and we can use it to transition to what is to come. Chantel, what you got on that?
I love that. I love everything you said. And I wanted to say, like, when we were thinking of the garden, of course we wanted the garden to be successful, right? But at that time, we didn't really have a metric. Like, what is successful in a garden? Is it growing the most food? Is it, having the most impact? Is it you have the most people, you do the most events, right? And so we had to define what success looked like for us. And that meant, adapting and changing and modifying, right? And, in the end, well, it's not the end, but, as we're going through the space, like our definition of success and our definition of what the garden can be used for is expanding and changing as we go. So it's really beautiful.
Next slide. We always dream big, but it's important to start small. One of the grand matriarchs of my family used to always tell me, when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Dream big, but start small just means focus on where you're at for the time being and celebrate the resources that are right there in front of you versus focusing on what you don't have yet. Always manifest it and call it into being. Chantel and I often hear defeat when we canvas, when we're looking for new sites, and we often hear community members talking about what they don't have. Oh, this has too much concrete. Oh, it's not going to get enough sun. And they often overlook the benefits that are staring them right in the face. Start small and build big. Evaluate your growing area because time and labor will build quickly. And especially when it comes to labor, you don't want to start off with lists that are overwhelming and are going to be too big to carry. Implement a reasonable crop plan. Again, go to the community and ask, what do you want to grow? What do you want to see here? And have a plan to make sure that the crop plan is manageable. Be realistic about your volunteers and their schedules. It's important to respect all members of the community and remember that volunteers are giving of their own time and volition, so they deserve our respect as well. Think about your resources. Craft your community outreach plan. Create and join partner networks. Those are all the buildups for ask for help. I'm going to say it again. Don't drown. You don't have to do this by yourself. Ask for help. Closed mouths don't get fed. And I promise you, if you just reach out your hand and ask for help, you will get someone who wants to and will. You've got two people right here who are already ready and willing to do that. Always dream big, but start small so that you can maintain and sustain what you're building. Chantel.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's beautiful. And it's like when you start small, you really start to cherish the small moments that are happening, like little baby Caden there, and he's watering the plants. And like, he was having such a great time in the garden. And I'm not even sure what day that was or if I was having a great day, but I remember I just seen him running around and he has this little watering can and, you know, he was just like flower and plant and butterfly. And it was just so cute. And it just brightened up my whole day. Right. And so it's like, if I had spent that time just being like, oh, I don't have this wheelbarrow or I don't have this I would have missed that moment. You know what I mean? So just appreciate things as they are happening, because those small moments are the collective energy that you're going to need later on to sustain the space. You know, he's going to have a different relationship with the garden than someone who didn't have that experience when they were younger, just being in the space and watering plants and kind of having an understanding and a relationship to it. Beautiful. Next slide. And so all of that looks like, you know, we dream big, we're starting small, right? And, you know, now it's like, okay, now we have to actually execute and, you know, create this community hub and create this beautiful space for all of us to inhabit together. And so it's going to look like, you know, setting up a budget. Maybe that's a budget for community events. You know, maybe your budget is $0, free 99, right? I mean, everything free. How can I get that, right? But set it up. What are all the things that you need? And then reaching out to partners and seeing who can ship and where. What are some reusables you can get? You know, what are some things you could get from your aunt? You know, have her make some macaroni and cheese or something, bring it to the bar. I don't know, but you know, setting it up so that way you can get all the things that you need, right? And then, you know, setting up your timeline and your proposals, right? So like, what's the season going to look like for the garden? And if you have to submit proposals for different organizations, what's that going to look like? What's the lift on that? And who can you get to support you in doing that work, right? And then as you're in the garden, making sure that you're keeping a log, that you have some type of paperwork that's there, either digital or on site, you know, the garden layout, you know, your seed catalog, your garden calendar, et cetera, whatever you need for the actual planting and for the actual sustainability of, you know, growing out the garden. Also, cross-promoting community events. So maybe you're like, you know what, Chantel, it's a pandemic. I can't be out here throwing a million events. Okay, so how can you support events that are already happening, right? So reaching out to your partners, saying, hey, if you got flyers, I'll hand them out, I'll post them, letting them know that you're there to support them. So that way, when you're ready to do your events and when you're ready to do the things that you're passionate about, they can in turn support you, right? Also, planning an orientation every growing season. So just letting people know, hey, the garden's back up and running, training people. Like I said, you don't want to be the only person watering. You don't want to be the only person pruning the tomatoes. You don't want to be the only person that knows how to trellis, right? You really don't. So whenever you have the opportunity and folks are there and they want to learn, teach them well, teach them the right way the first time, right? Don't have them just do busy work. Have them actually support the garden so you don't have to go back and fix what they just did, right? So, do that, because I know a lot of people do that. They have volunteers come and you just like, okay, you could just plant, and then they plant a whole bunch of stuff and it looks crazy and you got to go back and fix it. No, train them, train them to do it the right way, okay? And then also, solicit feedback. And then this is the hard one, right? Because we always want to hear, hey, you did amazing. I couldn't imagine anything you could have did better. But it's good to get that feedback from folks and to know what you actually could have did better, right? Like I said, that person that's like, hey, I would love if you had the meetings on Wednesdays, or hey, last meeting we didn't do our community agreements and I felt like somebody didn't abide by something, or hey, we need water, drinking water in the garden. Whatever that looks like, solicit that feedback so that way you can continue to create better experiences for the community. They can continue to show up and support you, and you can continue to show up and support them. And then, sharing an end of year review. And that might just look like, something on Instagram, follow us on Instagram. That might look like, sending out a mass email with a newsletter, just like, hey, these are all the things that we did in the garden. Whatever that looks like for you, feel free to do that. And, last but certainly not least is setting up, a calendar with different events, site visits that you're going to do, any meetings that you're going to have, just so that everybody can be on the same page. Dee?
When it comes to soliciting feedback, sometimes it just hurts, but you need feedback because these are your investors that are going to keep it truthful and transparent. These are your guardians who are watching the garden when you're not there. They're seeing actions in real time that maybe you're not seeing, and they're giving perspectives that are going to be helpful. Also, it's always important to train people so that they can garden effectively, but keep an open mind because you as the trainer might actually learn something. We never want people having to double back and do more work, but keep an open mind and allow people to experiment and learn at their own pace. Remember the first time you planted something. It wasn't perfect. It took practice, it took time, and it took patience. So while we're training, always give people the time and space that they need, be patient, and receive them how they show up. Next slide.
Wonderful. Yeah, and this is just an example of some of the garden programming that we've done in the sites. And this was all done with, community input and guidance on, what was necessary. And then some of them I kind of pushed on my own, right? Folks were like, I don't think we should do that. And I was like, no, I think we should. And we did it, and it went really great, right? So I think, sometimes you have to trust your gut, and also let the community know, hey, step outside your comfort zone a little bit and let's do this. And you might be pleasantly surprised, right? And so, we did a Mother's Day and Father's Day event. We did some nutrition workshops in the garden. We had an anti-violence fair that was awesome. We supported with the Castle Hill Family Day. We also had a community love day in the garden. We supported with the first annual Christmas block party, and we had this beautiful Christmas tree that people were loving. And I think because a lot of folks didn't really have Christmas trees, and I didn't know, but they were just outside taking pictures with the Christmas tree. And I was like, wow, that's really beautiful. Like we created this whole like kind of Rockefeller Center moment right here in the Bronx, right? And then also just making space for folks to explore the garden, to be curious, to see a ladybug, right? To see a butterfly, and just kind of just be in the space and feel accepted and feel welcomed in the space. So those were all really beautiful moments that we had. And in the next slide, we have some more pictures for folks to see, working with community partners. So anything that you don't want to do, you know what I'm saying? Your community partners, get them to do, you gotta move all these bags of soil, it's 50 of them, let's move them, you know what I'm saying? Put them to work. Also, having, teaching people some carpentry skills, because these are skills that they're gonna be able to use later on in life. And just also for them to just feel like they're actually helping and they're learning something, they're supporting the garden, it's a win-win. Using the event during community events. So folks are kind of out in the street and folks can come in and use the garden and sit down and eat and relax, and then also like engaging the youth with the space. So the kids planted the entire strawberry bed, and like every year they come, they're like, oh, strawberries, and they look at the little strawberries that are coming up and the flowers. And it's a really beautiful moment because now they have like this different connection to strawberries than that they did before, right? And so like really using the programming to create these beautiful moments with the community. Dee?
And when it comes to community garden programming, remember that it's never a one-size-fits-all strategy. What one community says that they want when it comes to programming, another community might be something, that they don't, or just a different direction that they want to go. Maybe one community wants all in-person events, but maybe another community wants a hybrid of both virtual and in-person. Maybe one community wants a job fair, but another community wants a book drive and a community fridge. Listen to the community and craft the events that the community is telling you that they want. Next slide. So in the garden, legacy planting is when we plant in succession. This is a lot of fancy talk that simply means we plant a row of seeds, and then 7 to 21 days later, we plant another row of seeds. And then 7 to 21 days after that, we plant another row of seeds. Legacy planting is the mentor and precursor to legacy planning. Take time to build a plan. Take time to build collective leadership that builds and supports everyone, including the stewards, the family, and the friends you haven't even met yet. The reality is we are all of us going through something. Sometimes people are just tired. They lose interest. Sometimes they pass away. Sometimes they move to another state. With legacy planning, not only is it important that we build the plan, but it's important that we are continually building community. Always seek out new energy, mainly so that your main stewards don't have to feel like they're carrying this on their own, and they don't have to feel burnt out mentally, physically, or any other lead you want to add. Plan in ways that not only build your garden now, but are going to create sustainable, maintainable moments for stewardship in the future. Chantel?
Yeah, I love that. And I think, when you do this legacy planning and you open it up for folks to be able to support you, you actually really be surprised at what people are willing to do. Menial tasks that you used to hate coming in early to do, someone else is really excited to do that. Someone else is like, I get to water, oh my God, I always wanted to, and I get the hose and you show me how to use the key, and they're over the moon, and you're like, okay. calm down. Let me show you how to do it so you can go ahead and do it, right? And so, you'll really be surprised once you start opening up the space more for people to support you, how willing they are to support you in tasks that they're really passionate about.
Next slide. Listen, there's been a lot of conversation today. There's been a lot of slides, a lot of words. It's Friday. Good news is, if you don't remember anything that we said, always remember this and take it to the garden. You don't have to do it by yourself, and you shouldn't. You have an entire community ready, able, and willing to help lift the heavy load. Share and lean into your village. Speak up. It opens up spaces for others to show you that they care. And it opens up spaces to show them that they're included. We manage and do all of that by simply communicating. And when we communicate, it's important to be intentional. Be personable, be welcoming, and be kind. Remember that body language is also a form of communication, and it speaks volumes just like your words. Check in with each other. We're always going to get to these seeds and these plants, but take time to just say, how you doing? What's good? What's going on? Tell me what's new with you. Always celebrate the wins, because you're going to need them when they're far and in between. Remember that the L is the lesson, not the loss. Everything is not always going to go your way, and that's okay, because honestly, it shouldn't. It's supposed to go the garden's way and the community's way. Take time to experience and acknowledge when things just don't work out, because the reality is sometimes they just don't. But when you take time, don't stay there. Keep it moving and keep going. Embrace the differences. We all have them. And as a matter of fact, who wants a dry garden? We want a garden that's reflective of the community. So bring those differences in. Always incorporate multilingual and multicultural aspects, because remember, the garden is for everyone, and everyone has the human right to access the garden. Read the room and be intentional about your audience. I'm gonna keep it 100% with y'all. I lost track of my cue cards and my slides like 6 slides ago. But honestly, I'm intentional, and I believe in my purpose and what I'm saying. And I'm reading the room of Chantel and my school gardens team that I know has my back and is going to keep me on track. Above all things, this is what it's really about, y'all. Have fun. If we're not going to have fun, then why are we even there? Chantel, I know you got it. Take us home.
Wonderful, wonderful. I just want to open it up for questions at this point, because I know we got a couple minutes left. And I think everything you said was just so on point, Dee. Great tips for people to remember. And you guys are going to get the slides so you can go through it at your own pace later on. So whoever's leading out the questions, let's take that away.
You both are so inspirational. Wow. Okay, let me get to the questions because we are short on time. We'd be happy to stay a few minutes after to try and get to these, but we understand if you have to go. Okay, first question, how were you able to secure partnerships? Earlier on, you talked about partnerships and securing them and trying to get them to work with you guys. How were you able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the partner, but usually you just go to people and talk to them. If they have a physical space, you go to that space, you introduce yourself, you say, hey, I'm Chantel, I have this garden, we're doing XYZ, we want to see how we can work together. Or if they have specific events that they're throwing, you go to that event and you kind of see, because sometimes you might think, oh, I want to be partners with this person. And then you go to their event and you're like, actually, I don't. So, I think sometimes it's good to kind of scope people out before you try to reach in for a partnership, because it might not be the partner for you, right? But when you go to those different partner events, they usually have their partners that are there. So then you have more of an opportunity to meet more people and kind of see what fits and what doesn't.
It's always important to do your due diligence and scope out your partners. Because again, who you think might be a good partner might be someone who the community tells you that they're not really rocking with. And you never want to bring in a partner that's going to make the community uncomfortable, going to exclude them, or just make the garden a place where the community that lives there isn't really going to want to go.
Great. Thank you. We've got several questions here from A. McDowell, who's listening really carefully and had some great questions. So I'm going to go through them one by one. The first one is, how does a new member of a community neighborhood learn what a garden wants or needs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think it just means taking time to go out and speak to folks. If you see folks are, always passing the garden, to stop those folks and introduce yourself and be like, hey, I'm doing this stuff in the garden. What would you like to see in this space? What are some things that are keeping you from coming into the garden? I see you walk by all the time. Surveys, those really help because you can capture a wider net of people. And then also, social media, actually, because you want to have it multi-generational. And I think in our respects, DK and I do that. I work a lot with the youth and she works a lot with the senior population. So, also leaning into social media and seeing, what are some young people that want to come out and support spaces, and how would they like to support the spaces? And just keeping it open. It doesn't have to be one specific thing. You can try a bunch of things and see what works for that community and what works for you.
You can also keep in mind that with the Castle Hill space in particular, that garden is right in front of a residence. So many of the NYCHA residences have TA associations. Like many buildings and apartments, they have superintendents. Don't be shy about contacting the TA association and just going to the super and saying, hey, I'm interested in this garden. Do you know who I can contact? Because 9 times out of 10, they do.
Thanks. And next question, when dealing with multiple people, viewpoints, and resources, how does a community garden decide which direction to pursue? Because like you said, you'll have a lot of different community voices and how you want to try and please all of them. How would you, how does the community decide what direction to pursue?
Yeah, I mean, this is where surveys come back in, right? And you'd be like, okay, we got 5 different things on the table that people keep bringing up. Let's choose out of these 5 and put it to a vote, right? It also can be based upon what you actually have the capacity to do. So if folks are like, oh, we want to have, this 1 acre magical rainforest garden, and you really only have enough funds for like 5 beds, it's like, oh, or hear me out, we could have these 5 beds and build towards that beautiful magical rainforest garden, right? And so, sometimes it's like hearing what everyone has to say, sitting with that, and coming up with a way for either that's what it's going to later transition into, or hey, this is the direction I think we need to go into. Because also you're there as the expert in the room to kind of guide the community in a way that is sustainable and that makes sense, but still being open to that expansion of different ideas.
And as the expert, it's important to remember, be honest. Sometimes you're just going to say things that the community doesn't want to hear. But in all of this community building, the one thing that you've built that you never want to compromise is trust. It's always important to say, hey, that sounds like a good idea, but maybe it doesn't, or maybe not. It's also important to remember there are 4 different seasons. So it's fine to spread things out. it's also fine to explore alternative spaces. Maybe we're doing what Chantel is planning with the youth outside, but maybe we're doing what I'm planning with seniors and older adults inside the community center. There's no reason that we all can't get in on this plan and come together to make it work together.
Just to piggyback off of this garden that Chantel wants to create and the types of space that DK was talking about, are there particular locations that would work best or that's better for a community garden? And what are those that are not ideal?
Oh yeah, I think we were talking about that day one, right? Laura was leading that workshop. So folks are always welcome to go back to day one. But I think some of the things that we look at is, is this space accessible for the community? Do we have enough traffic in the area? Do we have a sufficient access to water? What's the sun situation looking like? Do people feel good about congregating in this area? Because you might have a really beautiful space where you think is a beautiful space, but there was actually like, I don't know, some crazy thing that happened there 5 years ago and nobody wants to step foot over there. So it's like, you could build something beautiful and people are like, oh no, it's haunted, I'm not going over there, right? And so like, just being aware of like what folks are looking for as far as the spaces and how that's going to lean into all the other like environmental factors that you have to put in.
So basically
And when
research site and listen to the community.
Yeah. It's not a one size thing.
Yeah.
Definitely not. And when you're soliciting spaces, it's important to give non-traditional spaces a chance. We're in a situation right now where we are in partnership with an amazing partner who's the library. And we're looking at an amazing opportunity to potentially start an indoor growing system. It's also important when you're looking for spaces to frame your mind beyond the physical. You have to create an area that's accessible for all. And that means those of us that may be living with mental health challenges, or those of us that might be living with learning differences. So it's important to select a space that, again, is going to be inclusive and accessible.
Thank you, DK. We've got one last question from Amy, and you guys work with the 3 NYCHA sites, and she's interested in how were the 3 sites chosen in the first place for building the gardens? How difficult was it to get buy-in?
Oh man, I mean, it's not a walk in the park, you know what I mean? I mean, we're coming into spaces that don't know that they have the right to have access to green space, right? And so that's the first thing, is just letting them know, hey, did you know that you have the right to access this space and that we want to do this amazing thing here? And these are all the benefits that you can get from, being in touch with the land and being in the soil, so that's step one. And I think when it came to, how do we choose this space, we kind of let the spaces choose us. It was really, what communities want to have a garden, and, how is it sustainable? Do they have the different factors that will make the garden be successful? What are going to be some difficulties that we can successfully manage, that we feel good about? Because there are going to be difficulties no matter what space you choose, right? And so it's like, what are we willing to take on pretty early on, knowing, right? And Kristen, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, even before, Chantel, even before you came on board and we were writing this grant and we had the idea for it, we didn't want to like project this idea onto communities, right? And so like before we ever put one word on the page to write the grant, we went to some of our partners at NYCHA and we asked like, hey, if we were to do this, like, do you keep a list of individuals who've maybe reached out and they wanted a garden in their space, but they weren't able to get the resources that they needed in order to do it. And like, if so, would you be willing to share this list so that we can take a look? And like, that gave us our first touch point into like whether or not the communities that we thought were going to want this would actually want this. And it like narrowed our list down a little bit as well. And so, so we had like a little bit of a preliminary list. And then we were also like hiring for Chantel's position. Then we brought Chantel on board and we're like, this is amazing. Like now we're going to take this like list and look at it even further and like really go out into the community and see what they want and need. So I would say that if this is a space that you're interested in working in, making sure you have buy-in before you do any further work, you know, the whole goal here is to like empower communities to like reclaim these spaces that have maybe historically not been available to them, not to like go in and project out what we think the spaces could be. And so that's one of the things I've like really loved watching Chantel and DK bring to life. It's like, you know, the canvassing doc, maybe we might have had some partners in mind, but COVID changed the landscape of partners, right? And so like Chantel and DK have been fantastic about being like, well, this partner is no longer available, no biggie. There's like these 5 that have popped up in this space, and like maybe it's not like quite gardening, but how do we do it? So like your canvassing work really never ends from like the very beginning idea stage to like way after the it's launched, you know. It takes a community to sustain these spaces. So.
It really, really does. And also remember, sometimes the answer is no from the community, but sometimes the answer has to be no from you. Additionally, Chantel and I are experiencing a boom right now because the surrounding communities are seeing that this works. So it's really important that you stay intentional. And while I'm the first person to be like, you get a garden, you get a garden, it still has to make sense because we're setting up green spaces for longevity and we're setting up green spaces that are going to work. We never want to just come in, set up a space that we can't come back to, that we can't stay connected with to ensure and help that it's going to work. So don't just set it up because it's hot right now. Set it up because it makes sense. It's the right thing to do. It's what you want to do as a steward. It's what the community wants you to do as a steward. And we're all ready to come together and make this happen.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. That was the last of our questions. And we've got one request from you guys. If you can, I think Colleen put the survey in the link. Okay, if you can give us some feedback from this workshop, and if you've attended the other workshops, it would be great to hear from you guys. So please give us your input. Thank you, Chantel and DK, for these inspirational words and all this information. Go out there, get a community going. I think that's it.